This is a re-recording of a talk I gave at the Black Country History Day at the Black Country Living Museum on the 9th of November 2024. It's entitled The Black Country Environment of the Mid-20th Century Through the Poetry of Jim William Jones. We saw earlier how glimpses of Black Country history can be found through the paintings of John Louis Petty, and in this presentation we do something similar through the medium of poetry. We'll look at the Black Country environment of the mid to late 20th century through the poetry of a particularly sharp-eyed observer. And the picture, while necessarily more subjective and more personal than some of the materials being presented earlier, is, I believe, no less valid. The poet in question is Jim William Jones, so I begin by giving some brief biographical information to set the scene. Jim William Jones was born in Coseley on February the 15th, 1923, and spent his childhood and school years there. After leaving school, he began work with the engineering firm Joseph Sankey and Sons as a junior clerk. He was conscripted into the army at the age of 18 in 1941, taking part in the Normandy landings in 1944, and also serving in India and in Ceylon, reaching the rank of warrant officer. After the war, he returned to Sankey's and was trained in works management before leaving industry to join local government in 1955, where he worked in educational administration. He was a qualified teacher of speech and drama and a member of a number of amateur dramatic societies. He hosted a radio program on Beacon Radio and worked with the Black Country folk music group Giggity. He had a strong Christian faith and was a gifted speaker and a Methodist local preacher. He became a very well-known Black Country poet, both for his dialect poetry, the Black Country ballads, and for his poetry in more conventional English. Some of these can be found in three small publications by the Black Country Society: From Under the Smoke from 1972, Factory and Fireside from 1974, and Jim and Kate from 1986, all sadly long out of print. Some of his poems were also included in a 1976 anthology, Widening Circles, and he contributed numerous poems to the first 25 years of the Society magazine The Black Countryman from 1967 to 1992. He died in 1993. In what follows, we will read to you a number of poems in both standard English and in dialect. I'll read the former, and the latter will be recordings produced by Emma Purshouse. The difference between us, apart from the obvious, is that Emma is actually a poet and knows how to read poetry properly. We divide the poems into three categories: those describing the industrial environment, those describing people, or if you will, the social environment, and those describing the built environment of the Black Country. There is, of course, much overlap, and the division is an artificial one to some extent, but the other major distinction between them is also important: the distinction between those in standard English and those in dialect. The Black Country dialect, or as you might care to put it, the linguistic environment, is a defining feature of the history of the area and is as important as the other aspects, I think. In total, we'll read 16 poems, 10 by me in standard English and 6 by Emma in dialect. Those that Emma will read are rather longer, however, so the time will be split fairly evenly between us. Each poem will be illustrated by one or more images, mainly, but not solely, taken from the Black Country Society calendar collection. Mostly the connection of poem and image is quite loose, the best illustrative. We begin then with poems that illustrate the Black Country at work, the industrial environment. The first poem is a dialect poem that relates to an earlier time than Jim Jones, when coal mining was largely by hand in very hazardous conditions. Emma will read Gabriel from Gornal from Factory and Fireside, published in 1974. The image shows underground working conditions at the start of the last century.
I'm thinking of Gabriel from Gornal. The chap has worked by me at the coal face below. He don't do much talking about where he come from, his family, his life. kept hisself to hisself. Just a quiet chap I thought him. Gabriel, from Gornal, a earning his living, never bothering with none. Till one day it happened, down there, at the coal face. The roof timbers groaned, and the stones spluttered down. Then up springs this Gabriel from Gornal. He props his great shoulders where the roof threatened me. "Get out, you soft goby," says he. "You got children. I don't mind a dying, 'cause they're nobody more me." I day try to stop him, Gabriel from Gornal, 'cause I was a coward, and I run for me life. I run and I stumbled. The blind fear was upon me. I thought of me children, and I thought of me wife. Now I think about Gabriel from Gornal, a lying there smothered more than half a mile down. And I calls him softly, in my heart I calls him. You got somebody what mourns you, me old mate, you got me.
And now on to the 1940s. A Night on the Galusha from The Black Countryman of 1972. Jim Jones himself writes in the introduction. Dedicated to Joseph Jones of Penn, alas now deceased, who was affectionately known as American Joe, because he had lived and worked in the USA in his younger days, and with whom I spent many happy, but often uneasy night shifts on an industrial gas production plant at Sankey's Rolling Mills, Lanesfield in the late 40s. A Galusha was an industrial gas production plant, long discarded. The picture we use is of a gasworks in Tipton, from around 1930. The night is hugging its own shapes beyond the square pool of yellow light, where the giant's ashy excreta steams and trickles and settles itself. The great steel anus of the tower is now sealed with almost fearful care. No air can be allowed to enter there to rise and belch with fury through the fire. The steel stairway clangs like crackled bells as we climb back through the gas-filled gloom. On the first floor, the murky air like warm wool swirls and clings to our bodies, drawing sweat. The odour of yellow marsh gas is homely, strangely reminiscent of kettle boiling and the promise of tea, with butter and jam heaped on a knife. Joe looks at my bright new tea can, sparkling blue, as new to toiler's eye, feeling as strange as I in the smoke and the dust. I lift the lid and I take my cap. Joe is a broad chap with thick arms, skin brown as old oak with sun-filled wanderings, a character from one of Steinbeck's novels, casting a big shadow when he moves. At 2 a.m. the real work begins, breaking down clinker through the poke holes. The fire must be kept black to produce good gas. Our sweat falls and steams on the steel floor. At 4 a.m. and still sweating, we feed the monster with anthracite. I fill the fast-moving hopper while Joe, 70 feet above, controls its speed. The moon's fire, banked with ashes of cloud, ignites the white shroud of morning mist as we meet to light pipes on the high catwalk and puff the smoke into serious talk. About work or families, our homes, the risk involved with working with the gas, how a simple error could wreck the whole plant or blow a man into a mangled pulp. At 5 a.m. we ash out again. Joe shows me how easy it would be to let air in during this messy process. What a mess we would make exploded. We laugh, as men do at death dormant under some industrial guise, controlled by human hand, kept at bay each night and day in a channel of power for human need. The last drags of cold tea from my can wash away the grey dust from my throat. I get my coat in readiness to leave 6 a.m. and 16 hours reprieve. Day becomes unreal for night workers. We bear traces of the long dark hours. In our eyes the stale sweat of our bodies, and our shadows fade like ghosts in the sun. We move now to the iron industry, specifically to a rolling mill. Breakdown number 2 rolling mill, a recollection. This ends by describing the machine-man relationship in master-slave terms, which is no doubt how many would have thought it. The pictures are of Willingsworth Ironworks and the rolling mill of the Black Country Museum. A volley of shouts rises above the disjointed thunder of splitting iron rolls. Glossy sheets of fine steel, crumpled like discarded paper, eject and slither across the plated floor. Slowly, with rattle and groan, the mill dies, heaving its coal-smoke breath into silence. In a circling cloak of warm air there is a cadence of images. Frantic managerial faces caught in a sudden screen of sunlight jostle their commands into pewter gloom. Goaded limbs in silhouette contort the saffron rays of pent furnaces. Above the black oily miasma of the great wheel's pit, violet spectres locked in cocoons of blue lightning spray molten stars from their burning wands. In deeper gloom, tired mill workers tackle their reprieve with cold tea and tobacco, making jungle eyes with the grimy stubs of cigarettes. Now hovers the singing crane, manoeuvring new rolls with electric edginess. Tensions begin to ease. A new shout triggers out from the brain's muffled explosion. The monster resurrects, bounding into thunderous life, its world agog, its slaves smiling. We stay in the rolling mill for the next poem. Over the decades, industrial disputes were common and individually painful for many, as loyalties were tested. Emma reads the dialect poem Jonah and the Wheel from the anthology Whiting Circles of 1976. The picture is of workers at Samuel Downing and Sons, Gold Hill Ironworks in West Bromwich in 1913.
Now Jonah was a gracer down at the rolling mill. His job was very humdrum and did require much skill. His arms were like a baby's from using so much grace, and his head was grey and grizzled, and hard luck had lined his face. He'd clock on every morning, long before we others come, 'cause he lived all on his lonesome, and the mill was more his home. He'd go round with his grace pot to lubricate each wheel, and he'd do it all so cheerful no matter how he'd feel. We hardly had a breakdown with Jonah on the scene. He loved them wheels and spindles to go round raced and clean. One day a bolshy fella come working with me lot. He started making trouble 'cause he didn't care a jot. He said as how the gaffers had kept we short of bread to fill their own fat bellies. Comrades, let's strike, he said. Some of the blokes got restless listening to his gob. Oh, Jonah took no notice, just got on with his job. The bolshy said to Jonah, "You bloomin' saft old fool. You'll join us or regret it, you're nothing but a tool." 'Twas on a Monday morning, the strike was at its height. Outside the gates we waited, all full of hate and spite. Then up walks poor old Jonah and says, "Let me come by." But none of we had let him, so we begun to cry. "I've gotta do me gracing," says he. "Let me come through." Says we, "There's no wheels turning." Then Jonah got his pluck up and fought with all his might. He punched the bolshy fella, he went out like a light. Old Jonah pulled the switches and started up the mill. He got out of his grace pot and went round with a will. The bolshy bloke recovered and stirred me up again. We run into the rolling mill like bloomin' loony men. We picked up bars and hammers to smash up and destroy. The gaffers all skedaddled when we come rushing by. There was a great big flywheel, what made the rolls spin round, 10 foot above the floor and 10 foot underground. Old Jonah was a gracing to keep it going fast. The bolshy chucked a spanner as he went rushing past. The flywheel cracked and rumbled and robbled all about. Then come another cracking sound, and somebody gave a shout. They laid old Jonah on the floor, his head all caked with blood, and some and we as knowed him just blarted where he stood. He jumped down where the flywheel went down below the floor to fetch the spanner out again, but now he was no more. We got the bolshy fella and beat him up real good, 'cause he caused poor old Jonah to peg it where he stood. Old Jonah died of working, his grace pot in his hand. He taught we blokes a lesson as we could understand. The world just keeps on turning and never makes a sound. It's thanks to blokes like Jonah what keeps it going round.
Back to the foundry this time, the 1972 poem From Under the Smoke, Derelict Foundry, a haunting description of a dying industry and a glimpse of Jones's religious faith. The picture is of the Cannon Foundry in Coseley, taken in 1980, just before its demolition. The foundry, vast in its desolation, is haunted with the hollow murmurs of departed time. Grey phantoms of waning light move fitfully across the dusty floor. Echoes from the past seem to linger where the rusting girders thrust into the distant roof, and there is that yearning emptiness one finds in vacant places where men once lived and toiled together. Could one share in this unconsecrated air a feeling of sanctity, as in some cool and spacious church where the deepest passions of the soul have risen, blended and distilled? For here there is no altar, no stained glass saint, no clean white stone, yet suddenly one feels to constrain to kneel in the grey sand and the flaking rust, and sense a superb fitness in the fact that one should feel his presence here, amidst this mass of ruinous gear, where once men wrought with glowing steel, defined its shape on lathe and wheel, and rich in strength made richer still, the spirit of toil, the power of skill. We move on now to consider a number of Jim Jones's portraits of black country people, the social environment. We begin with Emma reading Big George a Striker. The picture is from 1912 of iron moulders at a Tipton factory.
When I was a kid, I'd go down the forge to take me dad's dinner and to see Big George. There was 6 mighty anvils set there in a row, 6 great big fires as would quickly blow into such a radiant hellfire heat as the sweat would squeeze out from your head to your feet, and would run down the faces of them as made churn and drop off their noses again and again, as they plucked out the iron from burning red gleeds, and the scale would fly out like bright toasted beads when the hammers come down with a smackety smack. Them were good days for me, and I wish they was back. Big George the Striker, he got arms like logs, all hairy and brown, and he weared moleskin togs. He swung a great hammer, although it wore there, and many's the time I felt full of fear, as the head might fly off and knock somebody flat. But George wore a man to do anything like that. He used to remind me of that bloke named Thor, as we learned on at school, but I don't know what for. You know, him as throwed a big hammer about whenever he'd got to sort somebody out. Big George was like Thor in his figure and face, but his hammer wore magic and stopped in its place. He'd stoop down and tickle me under me chin with them great hands of his, and then he'd begin striking the links while his mate held 'em fast, and I'd watch the bright fragments of scale flying past. And then he'd say, "Perhaps when you grow up you'll be a man as makes churn like your father and me." But when I growed up I went to a school what taught me to act like a gent or a fool. Any road, if I'd wanted to work making churn, I hadna the strength nor the pluck, 'cause it's plain you gotta be born a real man for that job. You don't need smart clothes nor a posh baking gob. Now them were the days when old England was great, 'cause men had to work for what they got ate. And what's more, they took a real pride in their work. Big George would have thought it a crime as to shirk. We don't see his sort in our country today. They want in saft jobs now, but double the pay. Big George had retired when I growed to a man. When I see him again, well, it put me one on. He was only a little chap, about 5'8", and me 6'2". Well, I felt pretty great, till I looked at his hands and his face. Then I said, he still was the giant, and me still the kid.
And now a recollection of a character from Jones's youth, Night Watchman, with a picture of such a figure, but from Worcester rather than the Black Country. Night watchman of old, watching the night go by, full of spangling stars in the big sky, or the moon bouncing through clouds, keeping your red lamps trim, guarding a hole in the road in case it got stolen or sneakily filled in, or, more sensibly, to avoid accident to unwary passers-by, your brazier firmly aglow, boisterous with sparks. Beyond its radiance you sat, illumined in your little box like some sacred Buddha framed in wood, bound for nirvana, with your hands on your belly. Lulled by the night sounds, you dozed and dreamed. Then in the morning, stirring your fire of flame with a scrub shovel, cooking bacon and egg on its hot iron blade, sending up food fragrance to mouth-water the air, the sweet aroma of tobacco smoked with old-fashioned relish in a good briar pipe. All this made the hole in the road a pleasure to endure. These days, most likely, you would be attacked, beaten up, your lamp smashed, your simple life made miserable by a strange new breed. You would never have understood. You were beloved of children. You brought a homely excitement to our street, for which my memory thanks you. Now a poem that appears on a Black Country Society Christmas card of 1980, a commentary on the picture on the front of the card that you can see on the screen. The poem and the picture are called The Sportsman. Sportsmen all, man, beast and bird, girth and grit, muscle of resolution, iron jaw, fang and claw, born in the iron echo of the foundry's din, the engine's heat. Fire and flame is the surge of their game. Animal power, primitive lust for blood stirs their ferocious pride. A violent trinity. The man, their manipulator, their urge, their driving force, their mentor. They, his children, his champions. They are his challenge to the world, his fight against life. Now a morning poem, an evocative description of the Black Country and its people coming to life on a Monday morning. Morning images. The morning is actually one of the main themes in Jones's poetry and clearly held a special fascination for him. The picture is of a rainy day in Cradley. I know of no other type of day there. Upright smoke hunches its shoulders under a raw sky. Silver roofs are sweating and steaming, reflecting the pewter matte finish of secretive sun-peering light tangled in threadbare clouds. Traffic sucks and puffs and scrapes. People come shuffling in, tap dancing their routine on a pavement stage, smiling their artificial Monday smiles, talking their artificial Monday talk. They slow to a kind of martial walk at the high-speed checkpoint, Tesco corner, the Woolworth wall, offices, banks, market hall, damp awning over stripy stalls, sagging like cold udders of striped cows, dripping watery milk onto cold hands. The pace of the crowds has become funereal, a procession of doom, out for a day's death of the soul. The office prisoner, the shop fawn, production liners so forlorn, a sweating tea-shop slave, a labourer digging his grave. Sick money gleaners finger-licking notes and coins, chinking pockets, smoking revenue mixture rolled in bank paper, coughing out copper breath and blowing silver down their noses. Then come the slack-eyed office cleaners, smelling of mops and slops and tabletops, and polish sprayed under their arms. And now, more somberly, a reminder of the reality of childhood mortality in the early 20th century, as seen from the 1980s. A child grave in Gornal. The picture is of a graveyard in Gornal that made the news recently because of its overgrown state. An old jam jar holds a few battered daffodils and 2 shriveled sills of frost-bitten green, and the stones are green in the crumbling wall. An infant's grave, it seems to rock in the biting breath of bitter winter's lingering death. Only an illusion. It is the pitiful flowers that rock in the glass jar's jellied slime. A tiny grave from those old times, framed with bits of old brick and littered with old stalks of long forgotten flowers. 60 years, they say, since this infant passed away. His short life was in a day when poverty held sway, and disease stalked where children played and walked, and ran in and about this Gornal street. A lonely man, 82 now, remembers the young boy, and comes stealthily out of the shadows of day with his wistful flowers, and as the light vanishes, the cold, muffling darkness seems a huge and crying thing. In the latter part of the last century, the wind down of industry, at first slowly and then dramatically, led to many losing their long-held jobs, and of course much more besides. Jones describes the human cost in another ballad that Emma will read, Unemployed. The pictures are from the period of closure of Round Oak Steel Works as recorded in the Bugle, the strike of 1980 and the faces of those made redundant in 1982. For many, the wound is still raw.
The chap what lives just over the road has come home from work in his car. He's rubbing his hands there and looking all smug. Now he's lighting a tuppenny cigar. His missus, all smiling, has come to the door. His kids and they're all overjoyed. I feel as I've come to the end of the road, 'cause for 3 weeks now I'm unemployed. The boss, he sent for me, Jack. He says, "How long have you worked for we now?" "Why, nearly 10 years," I says. "Why don't you ask?" "Well, it's like this," he says, speaking slow. "We're having to cut down, you know how things been. So it means you're having the sack. I'm sorry, old tater, that it's come to this, but it ain't nothing personal, Jack." He give me cards all stamped up right, a fine testimonial and all. I come home to face the dear missus and kids, but me back was right up to the wall. When you're 48, you're an old mum these days, so it's hard to get a good job. And when they keep saying we want younger men, well, it's just like a punch in the gob. I never thought as I'd come to this, a skulking about without work. I've never been Rodney like some blokes I know, and it's brought me right up with a jerk. 'Cause there's many a young man what worked longer me, what from Aigden was bullshit and all. And these were the ones what would give the best jobs, while the likes of me went to the wall. I've always been a machine tool man, apprenticed I was for 4 years. There's nobody could do my job better than me, but there's somebody who'll have it, I fear. And I'll back you, it's one of these here bullshit kids as don't care a damn for the firm, what'll codge the job anyhow just for dough, and then go on strike just for a game. I wonder whether trying your best and striving to do a good job is really the way to get on in this life when the plums go to some Rodney slob as leans on his union to get him off scot if he gets sacked for doing bad work, then preaches the rights for the workers and that, which is naught but the jam without cake. My wife and kids are going to be short, so I don't care what job I do. Though it seems a waste as a man with more skill has to stand in the unemployed queue. This country is going to the dogs, to be sure, and the trend and it's come from outside. I feel as we're near to the end of the line when the likes of me gets unemployed. The chap what lives just over the road has come on from work in his car. He's rubbing his hands there and looking all smug. Now he's lighting a tuppenny cigar. But he's got blooming money to burn. It sure makes me think, though I've reached 48, as I've got such a lot I can learn. That car he drives will want a new clutch, and his MOT's about due. I reckon I'll have to go give him a nudge, else he'll find as he'll be in a stew. You ain't gotta do summat when the days am so long, 'cause you can't sit about and just pine. And besides that, it gives me the chance again to have a look at the car as was mine.
Moving on now to Jones's description of Black Country places. We first hear Black Country Slaughterhouse. I don't know to which slaughterhouse it refers, either Marsh and Baxter's in Brierley Hill or probably more likely Palethorpe's in Dudley Port. The picture I've chosen is of the Palethorpe shop in Oldbury. The executioners bestride the road, their white gowns flecked with blood. Their arms are thick and dark with hair, swift in movement, eyes aware, as they form their grisly barrier across a sunlit morning street, slowing the tramp of morning feet, halting the rumble and the rhyme of wheels, with the imminence of blood. The smells of death and cringing fear and fleshly rottenness are here, intermingling the air we breathe its odour with despair, and retch in our souls' clean depths for the carnivorous strain that keeps us on our carnal plane of hungering for fresh killed meat and the salt-sweet taste of blood. Now the doomed herd tumbles forth in close-packed hordes of jostling pink, squealing, leaping on each other, running the rubber-booted gauntlet of those white-gowned, blood-flecked giants who crouch and weave and flex their hairy arms like trees in wind, watching for the pig with shifty eye, who might espy an opening and fly blind with fear into the watching street to dodge the wheel and the crowding feet and seek escape, he knows not where nor why. When they are gone, our life moves on, forgetting soon the tragedy we looked upon. Nor could we ever comprehend the blind, unreasoning race to death of pigs, whose tiny pink-toed feet ran fearfully across a sunlit street. The next poem is entitled Closing of Trinity Church, Great Bridge, in which Jim Jones's Christian faith is made explicit. But it also speaks to the importance of nonconformity in the history of the Black Country up to the middle of the last century, and describes a common pain felt by church members at the closure of their church. The chosen picture is of New Street in Great Bridge. The church was, I understand, some way further up the street. There was a day when this old building rang with song, and mighty was the throng that came to hear the word preached with fervour and devotion. As in that other time, on a mighty wind, the tongues of flame fell here, and found in many hearts a place in which to burn. What do we learn from looking now upon its desolation? Has God closed the doors and shuttered up its windows in despair? Ask yourself, does a seed sown in fertile soil cease to grow because a door is shut somewhere, or here and there a stone may crumble? Man cannot board God up, or bury him in dust, or sell him out to commerce. Trinity is closed, but God has gone his way about the streets of Tipton, large and powerful in the hearts of men. Now Emma will read to us Park Lane, Tipton. The picture shows Park Lane School on an old postcard.
You'll see no top hats here, unless someone is getting spliced. And even then, a trilby or a cap, perhaps. But like as not, no hat at all, just hair, shifting in the breeze. And the bridegroom steadying his knees while someone quips, "You've done it now." You'll see no Bentleys here, drawing up in the silent hours, with bejewelled occupants, sable wrapped, fresh from the theatre or some ritzy bar, slightly tipsy with champagne. But in the rain there may be seen some lovelorn chap walking with his queen. You'll get no caviar here. "Who wants it any road?" they'd say. "That Russian stuff, I've had enough of that afore I try it. Gimme fish and chips, or peas, pig's pudding, or cheese. Good wholesome fickle, that's what we like. But caviar, I'd go on strike." You'll find no hotels here. A pub or two with lots of beer and lively talk. Some warm and friendly folk. A church with clean-cut spire. A school, some shops. Nothing to call fine. But east or west, this Park Lane is mine. One feels significant down here.
And now a wholly realistic and unsentimental description of the grime and muck that defined so much of the Black Country in its late industrial days. Milltown waterways. The picture shows a canal rail interchange, one of which still exists in a dilapidated form in Monmore Green. I, standing on iron bridges, dream of clean washing waters, washing black rocks with white spume, born in mountain fastnesses where the sky touches the earth, leaping to lower reaches through sun-drenched glades, redolent with pure nature, lively mirror for colorscapes, held in the heart of England. I, standing on iron bridges, see oil and rust and flotsam, languidly blending in swirls after the passage of laden barges. Sullen green water lacking life, stealing movement from wind or the passing pull of craft. Mirror for drab landscapes. Foul grave in lonely reaches, for discarded rottenness and filth. The closure of the blast furnace Elizabeth in 1977 made a very strong impression on many Black Country folk and seemed to speak of the finality of the death of the iron industry. Jim Jones writes in the introduction to his poem Death of a Blast Furnace from Jim and Kate from 1986. The closure of British Steelworks Bilston, formerly Alfred Hickman's and after that Stuart and Lloyd's, was a great blow to the Black Country. This poem was written on the day the great blast furnace Elizabeth was demolished by explosives. The pictures on the slides are from Black Country Society Christmas cards. Emma reads, Death of a Blast Furnace.
Another landmark gone, toppled over like a dying mon, blasted to the ground with never a sound, except the sickening rumble of a giant's tumble, making the earth shudder. What a landmark it was and all, towering its awesome might, seething out fire at night, shimmering with fervent heat, making dwarves and men round its feet, spewing out sun-bright, spangling steel, what had the feel of hell as it passed you by, making a path with its own inner thunder. The nearby chimney stacks like soldiers with drill stiff backs, having a quiet smoke, a laugh and a joke, while the gaffer wore a looking, leaning on the blue sky, while summer went sneaking by. Elizabeth, my wench, you're all smoshed up. You never thought in your young days that it had come to this. Well, I never did any road, but I'm thankful I knowed ya, and thankful I showed ya to my kids afore you died. Bilston will be the same, without the splendour of your mighty frame.
And our final poem, Across the Leas, from the Black Countryman of 1989, reflects on the trauma of the industrial decline of that decade and contains for me an unforgettable description of the Black Country as a sick dog, lying down, no fight left. The picture shows a view across the Leas from Dudley Port. In the night, you would hear the big steam trains shouting to one another across the Leas, and the bark of their funnels as they strained at the snake line of singing trucks loaded with coal, pig iron, sheet steel from the mills. In those days, the Black Country was an empire of industry, fire and smoke, iron and steel, the wrenching of coal from deep earth, and limestone for the flux of boiling furnaces. Foundries, rolling mills, big men grappling with great power, and women, aproned in sacking, head tied, tough as the man they married, working as hard and bearing crowds of children, some to die in the constant battle to survive, in the boxy cottages, back to back, sometimes six to a bed. In the night you would see, like an early dawn, a yawning glow of red fire across the Leas, and hear the heartbeat booming of pistons, thrusting great wheels and heavy rolls, and the furnaces puking their radiant vomit out. In those days, factory sirens would start the day in grand symphonic manner. What wondrous notes, with the sun's baton beating and the sky shouting bravo with clapping clouds giving standing ovations from the galleries of heaven. In these days, the Black Country is lying down like a sick dog, no fight left, iron and steel, the dribblings of an old tack tin, crumbs of fire from the kicked ashes of bygone days, foundries, rolling mills, all dead, like the men who gave them life. And so there we end, hopefully having given you a different kind of historical view of the Black Country environment. We've used only a small subset of Jones's poetry, of course, and the range of his work is much greater than that which we've covered. Should you be interested in looking at more of his poems, then From Under the Smoke and Factory and Fireside are available as free PDFs to Society members on the Society website, together with a PDF of a compilation I produce that includes some of the poems first produced in The Black Countryman. Alternatively, if you aren't a member, each of them can be purchased for £5 from the Society shop, or £10 for all three. Thank you to all who've listened to this, and I hope you've enjoyed it.